Hello.
Good morning.
This is Hearing Officer Ryan.
Yes, hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm Melissa, your court reporter.
Very good. How are you doing?
I'm doing just fine. I just wanted to make sure that you can see me. Would you prefer not to see me? I can do this and just leave my.
Yeah, no, I think it's better that I do see you. Just
Okay.
because I'm just thinking last time with Allison, I have a bad habit. I'm from New Jersey and the East Coast. And we speak so fast.
Okay.
So
Oh, geez. Let me make sure I shut that.
If I can see your expressions, and if you're like, trying to keep, I'll try very hard to slow down. But
Okay.
it's good to just be able to see your body language so I can make sure.
Okay.
And it's clear, I can see also if you can't hear somebody, if someone's audio starts getting screwed up, that kind of thing.
Okay. 1 second here. I'm going to set, but you can hear me okay. That's good.
I'm going to put on other headphones, by the way. I haven't gotten them out yet.
Oh, okay.
I have a headset and it's got a mic and everything. So I'm having my last cup of tea and the banana.
All right. Well, I will continue to, I sent you a link for real time. I didn't know if you wanted it, but I sent it.
I saw that. Thank you. So my, probably not for this proceeding, but like I know
Perfect.
This is going to be pretty straightforward. I don't think we're going to go very long at all. It shouldn't be more than a couple hours here. Yeah, because it's an unopposed stipulation. Everybody's agreed to an outcome. So I'm just asking a few questions and that'll be that.
That'll be easy. Yeah, that's great. Easy. That's perfect for my real hearing in my own name. Oh shoot, let me grab that phone.
Sure, yeah, I'm gonna go.
Okay.
I'm gonna have the tea and everything. So I'll talk to you in a bit. Hey, Anna.
Hello.
No audio, Anna.
Let me get my-
I think it's probably because it's a Bluetooth headset, and then the settings on the machine have to be correct. And then the Zoom settings are like below the settings for the Bluetooth. So we still don't have audio on her. She just came to say hello, Melissa, just FYI. She's actually just,
Oh,
no, nothing. The last set of headphones I had from Logitech too, the mic just stopped working, and they actually sent a replacement pair. They can break. No. You could call on your cell phone, Anna, if you wanted.
I wonder if she could have just disconnected that headset and talked directly to the computer.
Yeah, it probably, well, it depends. I guess, I'm not sure if she's operating off of like a
Oh,
PRC supplied laptop, or if she has like because that should have
Oh.
a built-in mic, you're right, but or if she has like a desktop computer at home that she's got, and you'd have to have the mic. I don't know. Yeah.
yeah. Okay, that's all right. Oh,
That's probably
gotta-
her.
Oh, no, I'm hearing that. Oh, let me see. Maybe she did call me. I left her my number. That face is ringing. Hello.
That was much easier than just over, yeah. If you just double click that top bar. It does the same thing.
Okay. This one view, well, our attorneys aren't on yet. Oh, this is it, that's on so far. Okay, yeah. And so I was gonna tell you,
And then this, do you need to go back down to the exhibit or?
no, that's fine. So, yeah, so when you have.
Well, that was the last one that came in.
Here it is, this is.
Hello, Mr. Provencio. Didn't hear you, sir.
Can you hear me?
Now we can.
Okay, good deal. Good morning.
How are you?
I'm doing fine, sir.
Good.
Morning, this is Jim Schiestel. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Mr. Shishel. How are you?
Hey, good morning. I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Fine. A little bit of an echo on your audio.
Yeah, we're working on it.
Yeah, I just,
There we go.
Anna, I can't hear you, Anna, if you're trying to communicate. Still no audio.
All right, thanks, guys.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. How are you, Anna?
I don't know what happened here. Yes, I'm well, thank you. Melissa, I'm just logging in to say hello and to
Hi.
meet you in person.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for taking this.
No problem. I'm happy to help.
All right. See you then.
All right.
I've got 8:58. We'll wait 2 more minutes. I know Ms. Beatles will not be joining us, but Mr. Simpson and Mr. Herman, I understood, were going to be present. They both confirmed. So see if they appear in 2 minutes. Oh, there's Ms. Stevens. Forgot about. Okay, well, I've got 9 a.m. on my cell phone here. There's Mr. Simpson. And the only intervener who hasn't appeared as of yet is Mr. Herman for Doñana County. I know he indicated he was going to appear, but I don't believe he had questioning or anything, so I think we can just get started. Ms. Gonzalez, did I
Yes.
pronounce that correctly?
Yes, you did.
Thank you. So we'll go ahead and get started. We are on the record now. We are here for a hearing in case number 20-00194 UT in the matter of El Paso Electric Company's application for approval of abandonment of Rio Grande Power Plant Unit 6. Today is Thursday, August 26, 2021. My name is Christopher Ryan. I was appointed as the hearing examiner to preside over this case. And I'll start by taking appearances with EPE.
Good morning, Mr. Hearing Examiner. Jeff Wexler from Montgomery and Andrews. I also have Jordan Kessler from the General Counsel's Office of El Paso Electric here in the room with me. I'll be presenting Mr. Shishtel and Mr. Guadarrama, and Ms. Kessler will be presenting Mr. Gallegos. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wexler. And I also would just add, I appreciate that everyone was willing to have everyone come. I apologize for creating more work if that was what was done. I was trying to do my best to accommodate what everybody wanted, but I just read all the material, and in an attempt to be thorough, I just have a few questions, nothing extensive. So I appreciate everyone's willingness to come.
No problem at all, Your Honor. We're happy to accommodate it.
Thank you. I just didn't know, you know what they say about good intentions, right? So I was trying, but I think I learned something from that in any case. All right, Ms. Stevens, the city.
Good morning, Mr. Hearing Examiner. I'm Anastasia Stevens. I'm representing the city of Las Cruces. I see that witness Jose Provencio is here, and I was just going to check on my phone. I think Ms. LaRock may be watching on the video and on the YouTube in the usual manner, but I'll make sure she's with us.
Yeah, and I understand that, Ms. Stevens. Thank you. And if your witnesses want to have their stuff off and just listening, and that's fine. I don't want to interrupt.
I'm sure she's here. I think it's just where.
Sure, that's fine. Okay, Doñana County, Mr. Herman, how are you?
Doing well, Mr. Examiner. Thank you. Keith Herman for Doñana County. It's good to see everyone this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Herman. Ms. Beatles from Western Resource Advocate emailed me and indicated she would not attend today's hearing. Western Resource Advocates, whichever one that is, are an intervener, but they were excused from today's proceeding. She indicated she had no questions or other desire to participate. Ms. Souls.
Good morning, Mr. Hearing Examiner. I am Mary Lee Souls. I'm a pro se party in this case.
Very good. And Mr. Simpson.
Good morning, Mr. Hearing Examiner. Yes, I am Philip Simpson, another pro se intervener in this case.
Thank you. And last but not least, Mr. Black from staff.
Thank you, Hearing Examiner Ryan. David Diog, D-A-Y-O-G Black, representing the Utility Division of the Public Regulation Commission, and I'm presenting the witness, Jack Sedler.
Morning, Mr. Sidler. How are you? I saw your mouth move, but you're muted, but that's fine. You don't need to unmute, Mr. Sidler. It's fine. I know your audio works, sir. I heard it earlier, so we're good. Okay, Ms. Kippenbrock from the Hearing Examiner's Office, our paralegal. She was in charge of determining whether any public comments would be offered. I'm pretty confident that was provided in the notice that if there was commenters, they were to contact her. No one has contacted her, so there won't be any public comments today. So we're here today in this hearing on a unopposed comprehensive stipulation. We're here principally for the purposes of receiving testimony and largely as a consequence of my interest in just asking the witnesses several questions. through email communication leading up to these proceedings, the city pointed out, in these types of proceedings, as it's an unopposed stipulation, and there is a rule against friendly cross-examination, there should be no cross-examination of each other's witnesses in light of the fact that everyone's in agreement on the same page. I did write in the email, however, that there would be opportunity for questioning based on my questions. I don't have extensive questions. I mean, the most questions I have are for Mr. Schichtel. The point of me asking them really is to just be thorough. I want to produce the best recommended decision that reflects the parties' agreements. And so just matters for clarification. So again, there will be opportunity for additional follow-up questions based on my questions, but they will be limited to the matters in which I have inquired into. Is that, does anyone have any objections to that? I see head shaking. Very good. I do have one matter before we go to Mr. Schichtel. I will bring up on my screen. This is just a point of clarification I'd like to have addressed for the record. Let me share screen 2. All right, so we should be looking at Mr. Schichtel's stip testimony. Oh, I've got to get my Microsoft Word over here. Yeah, so we're looking at the comprehensive stipulation. This was attached to Mr. Schichtel's stipulation testimony. That would be a EP Exhibit 4, and it's James Schichtel ST1 of Exhibit 4. That's the attachment. And so I highlighted those words right there. This is provision 1.4 in the comprehensive stipulation, loads and resources table. The stipulating parties agree that from the date of a final order of the commission in this case, EPE not include RG6 on its loads and resources table for planning purposes. And so I'm aware that the stipulation in this case provides that this docket, this case number, is to remain open for actually a bit of period of time through the years in which the new resources are brought online and are proved to be reliable, and then finally at the end of that process, RG6 will then cease use, or everyone will cease use of that unit. And so my question was, and I've seen Mr. Sidler's testimony in which he indicated that it was his understanding that the final order that we're referring to in this agreement is the final order on the recommended decision from this stipulation. It's not the final resolution of this case, which shall remain open. So if Mr. Wexler, could you just confirm, is that the agreement of the parties?
Yes, Your Honor, that's our understanding of that agreement. And just by way of explanation, the rationale is in order to allow the company to do reasonable resource planning in a way that isn't inhibited by keeping RG6 on the LNR table. So for example, we're doing a lot of adding renewables in order to meet our obligations going forward, both to the RPS and to customers, and allowing us to take RG6 off the LNR table then allows us to reasonably plan for those new resources.
And is that the rest of the parties' understanding of basically this agreement? And I'm partly doing this just for the record because I read that provision and it wasn't entirely clear given the way all of the case will proceed along from this point forward. So did any of the interveners have anything to say about that subject, or did Mr. Wexler correctly reflect everyone's view?
Mr. Hearing Examiner, this is Anastasia Stevens on behalf of the city. The city totally agrees in terms of the LNR table. We didn't necessarily contemplate that the docket would remain open as opposed to having it closed with compliance filings, but that's the commission's choice, not ours.
Okay, I guess so, Ms. Stevens. When I read the stipulation, I understood that this case is going to remain open. This particular, or are you indicating that you think a new case would be opened to, because there is some filing requirements, as I understand, that comes from EPE. Is that correct?
I think they're just, I was saying, I'm thinking that they were compliance type filings within a closed docket as opposed to keeping the docket open. Not that there's ever going to be a new docket unless something goes seriously wrong. We have to start over again, but just that they would be compliance filings within a closed docket. I don't know that it makes a great deal of difference. Except to the commission having the long list of open dockets they have to try.
Right, I wasn't sure either. And so, Mr. Wexler, is Ms. Stevens correct that you anticipated that the docket would get closed at the end of this case and there'd be compliance filings? Is that?
Yes, Your Honor, we're comfortable with that. The only thing that I would point out is there is a provision in the stipulation that does allow EPE the possibility, or at least it contemplates the possibility that EPE might have to do a filing in the future if there were some significant change in the condition of RG6.
And that's what I understood. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think the recommendation that Ms. Stevens is making is perfectly fine with the company.
That might be more on my end to figure out what's most pragmatic for the commission in terms of keeping cases open or closing them. And I think I can address that to some extent with people on my end. Okay, so the only other question I have about that subject matter, and I just want to address this before we get witness testimony, I'll share another document. So this is the 18-00293 case. And so this was the proceeding that all the parties identified in their filings, in which the commission ordered, and I'm reading paragraph 18 from that order closing docket. The commission finds that full capacity of Rio Grande 6 should be included in future loads and resources tables until the projected year of an abandonment filing. And I presume that and I'll start with you, Mr. Wexler, the idea from the parties was, well, this is that time. And that in fact, we can do that specifically based on this language here. And I just kind of wanted to get a quick comment on, so the reason they did this is the commission found this is because excluding such capacity from loads and resources tables causes an understatement of capacity and a potential overinvestment in future capacity. And I'm guessing you're probably going to tell me like, no, we've reached a point where that's just not true anymore.
Yes, Your Honor, that's correct. From our perspective, RG6, the stipulation is consistent with this language. And the reason is that RG6 simply isn't contemplated to be used any longer. And so we're at that point where it should be removed from the LNR table.
And does anyone else, any of the interveners have any comments on that? Or I'm just trying to get a complete record here because, you know, we have that order. And so of course, the language just says, I suppose, you know, when the abandonment filing comes, it can be removed from loads and resources tables. And just want to confirm that everyone agrees with that. I don't hear anything, so I'll assume that is the case. Okay. Let me go back to my Word document here. All right, so EPE, you may call your first witness, Mr. Wexler.
Thank you, Mr. Hearing Examiner. EPE calls Mr. James Schichtel.
And Ms. Gonzalez, if you could swear the witness in, please.
You bet. Raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Schichtel.
Good morning.
Do you have before you what's been marked as EPE Exhibit Number 1, your direct testimony filed on October 6th, 2020?
Yes.
Was this the testimony that you submitted in this case?
Yes.
Was it prepared by you or under your direct supervision?
Yes, it was.
Do you have any corrections to EPE Exhibit Number 1?
I do not.
And we can see from looking at the table of contents page that you did not have any exhibits attached to this particular testimony. Is that correct?
Correct.
Is the testimony contained in EPE Exhibit 1 true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
Yes, it is. I will point out that when I filed this testimony, I had a slightly different title than is included on the subsequent testimonies, but that's corrected in the, not corrected, but updated in the subsequent testimonies.
Appreciate that. If you were posed the same questions that are presented in EPE Exhibit number 1 this morning, would you give the same answers?
Yes.
Mr. Hearing Examiner, we would move EPE Exhibit Number 1.
Any objections? The exhibit's admitted.
Mr. Schichtel, do you have before you what's been labeled as EPE Exhibit Number 2?
Yes.
And is that the rebuttal testimony that you caused to be filed in this docket on June 28th, 2021?
Yes, it is.
Any corrections to EPE Exhibit 2?
One minor correction on page 21 on line 8. The word proceeds should be proceedings.
All right. And I believe there's no exhibits to your rebuttal testimony as well. Is that correct?
Correct.
Is this rebuttal testimony EPE Exhibit 2 true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
Yes, it is.
If you were posed the same questions under oath this morning, would you give the same answers?
Yes, I would.
Mr. Hearing Examiner, we would move EPE Exhibit Number 2 into evidence.
Any objections? The document's admitted.
All right, Mr. Schichtel, now we'll turn to EPE Exhibit Number 3. It's entitled Your Supplemental Testimony, filed on July 12th, 2021. Was this supplemental testimony prepared by you or under your direct supervision?
Yes.
Any corrections to EPE Exhibit 3?
Yes, one minor correction on page 9 on the first line. The abbreviation UPC, which is the abbreviation for use per customer, is really not necessary. I think it can just be stricken. It's not used subsequently in the testimony.
Very well. And then again, there are no exhibits to EPE Exhibit 3, right, to your supplemental testimony?
Correct.
Is EPE Exhibit 3 true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
Yes, it is.
If you were posed the same questions this morning, would you give the same answers?
Yes, I would.
Mr. Hearing Examiner, we would move EPE Exhibit Number 3.
Any objections? EPE Exhibit 3 is admitted.
All right, Mr. Schichtel, and then finally, EPE Exhibit 4 is entitled Your Testimony in Support of the Unopposed Comprehensive Stipulation. It has a date of August 16th, 2021. Do you have that before you?
Yes.
Was this testimony that was submitted by you in this docket?
Yes.
Was it prepared by you or under your direct supervision?
Yes, it was.
Any corrections to EPE Exhibit 4?
No, no corrections.
We do have one exhibit labeled Exhibit JS-ST1, and that's the unopposed comprehensive stipulation. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you're sponsoring that exhibit and you're familiar with the stipulation.
Yes, I am.
Any corrections to EPE Exhibit Number 4?
No.
Is EPE Exhibit 4 true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
It is.
If you were posed the same questions this morning, would you give the same answers?
Yes.
We move the admission of EPE Exhibit Number 4.
Any objections? That exhibit is admitted as well.
Great. So with that, those are all of Mr. Schichtel's exhibits that he's sponsoring. So we would tender the witness.
Thank you, Mr. Wexler. Good morning, Mr. Schichtel. How are you, sir?
Good morning. I'm well, thank you. How are you? I'm
very good, thanks. So you heard my question to the parties a moment ago about that language in that 18293 case. And as I was reviewing these materials, I thought to myself, you know, one of the things the commission might ask is, why are we now allowing EPE to not include this unit on the loads and resources table? Because we ordered them to do that previously. And I think there's an answer, and I just want to hear from you, sir, as a factual matter, why it is now that it is acceptable to exclude RG6 from the loads and resources table, and how doing this moving forward is not going to cause an understatement of capacity.
Well, I think, I mean, the first part of the answer would be the prior order identifying the filing of an abandonment as, and this is the way I thought of it, as the trigger for removing the resource from the LNR table. Really, you know, that was the rationale, even with the timing of the filing itself in 2020, is then the Rio Grande Unit 6 is no longer reflected on the LNR tables going forward. I think that the clarification in the stipulation obviously is that the issue is being resolved with respect to Rio 6 and us continuing to not show Rio 6 on the LNR is consistent with the prior order and with the presumably with an order in this case. I thought the language in the order with respect to the over or under reflection of capacity might be a little confusing, but the notion is that once a unit is retired really from regular service, it would no longer be reflected on an LNR because an LNR document is used for planning purposes, and really you need to reflect what your capacity needs are or any deficiencies going forward. And so that's the intent of the removal. We had, as I indicated in my testimony, we had long ago replaced the capacity reflected or provided by Rio 6, and so it was reasonable to remove it. Certainly from the perspective of we're not going to operate it anymore, it was reasonable to remove it from the LNR. The LNR is a planning document, and so the first step in that is to ensure that we have accurately reflected within each year going forward the amount of capacity available to serve loads, so we can then make decisions about the need for additional capacity. So I think it's consistent.
And then I guess the other thing I heard Mr. Wexler say is just in terms of planning for the future, the REA and the desire to, you know, bring in the renewable resources. Is there anything to add about that subject? What he said there?
No, I think what Mr. Wexler was indicating is that whereas long-term resource planning, you know, from just a system perspective might have resources spread out over time, the REA requirements and the need to get up to the level of renewables required in the RPS percentages really has us adding resources more frequently. And so accurately reflecting that what's needed in the LNR is critical for that.
Thank you. And I assume that was your answer. And partly I'm just doing this to have a completed record so the commission, if any of them have that question, that we'll have an answer.
Sure.
So let me bring up your supplemental testimony real quick. And this is at page 2 to 3, and I'll share it on the screen so we can look on together. I think that's the easiest. So give me just a second to share that. So I asked you this question, Mr. Shisto, and the reason I asked it was I understood basically what Ms. LaRocque was saying in some of her testimony, and Mr. Provencio too, to some extent. But I principally remember Ms. LaRocque making this point, was that, you know, there's this question about, well, what's a better deal for the ratepayer, buying power or using RG6? And so when I saw her making those kinds of, you know, asking that sort of question or making those kinds of arguments, and I think she was effectively trying to say that the RG6 is going to be the better deal. And I'm sure you could debate about that for a while. But in any case, so it occurred to me, well, it's like, well, let's try to get a comparative assessment of what's the likelihood that RG6 will be less costly than you know, purchasing power. And so I asked you to sort of give me an apples to apples comparison. And I saw the answer, and I hope I'm looking at the right. Yes, this is. And your answer here was, is if RG6 is operated during summer of 2021 to serve customer load, the only costs passed on to customers would be the natural gas consumed and reflected in EP's monthly fuel and purchase power cost adjustment clause. The cost per megawatt hour would be a function of real-time summer gas costs and the RG6 summer heat rate of 12,400 BTU per kilowatt hour. And so when I read that, I said, well, I don't know really what to make sense of that, to be honest with you. That's a little bit beyond my pay grade, let's say. So can you perhaps clarify for me, can you give any further, I mean, really what I was trying to do in asking that question was to assess that argument that she's making. And what's really the better deal, purchasing power or running RJ6?
Well, sure. And let me try answering it in a different way. I think the way you pose that question, the alternative would be to simply plug in some numbers from assumed gas prices and do the calculation. But I think one of the problems with those arguments and then this question is it presumes that RG6 can be run to serve load, say in the same capacity as Palo Verde Unit 3 or any other currently operating unit. And the issue here is really that's a pretty big assumption. If Rio Grande Unit 6 was just an operating unit and had we planned to have it operating this summer as a unit to serve load, to be dispatched on an economic basis and exactly what you're suggesting here, in other words, where you look for the most economic resource to serve the next portion of load, then it's a pretty simple question, and this is the answer. But the larger question is Rio 6 available at all? And we haven't operated Rio 6 to serve load since 2018, I believe, or even before 2018. I believe it was prior to 2018. And so the issue itself is Rio 6 as a normal operating unit. And what that means is the unit's ready to go. It's sitting there to be dispatched by our systems operations folks on the basis of need and cost. And it's just not that type of unit anymore. And the whole notion of us identifying it on a contingent basis for 2021 is it's really only to be turned on and operated on a contingent basis if nothing else is available, perhaps not even purchases. And so I think a question like this has to be taken in that context. Certainly from a pure, say, mathematical perspective, it's gas price times heat rate, and that's the cost of running the unit. And then you could compare that to some other unit or purchases. But the problem with that assumption is it's a very big question whether you could do that. In other words, whether RG6 would be operated in that way.
And I guess to follow up on that, I discern in the stipulation that there's still a bit of a gamble, so to speak, with the question about failure, with the question about what level of maintenance is necessary. Is that a correct understanding? I mean, like we really just don't know, so it's sort of we're just going to proceed and hope for the best. Is that the idea?
Yeah. Well, we certainly don't have any indication that we shouldn't be counting on the unit on a contingent basis. That's the and obviously the very first question there is one of safety. And while we have tested the unit this year, operated it, are confident that if we called on it, it would be available and could safely serve load. Then the question becomes, okay, how much can you do that during the summer? How many times can you do that? So it is a reliability question at some point. And as I said in my testimony at various places in my testimony, our planning with respect to the abandonment to keep it for the summer of 21 was as much about uncertainty about our load requirements in 21 as anything else. In other words, we had the pandemic effects in 20, whether or not that would extend into 21. We certainly are confident that if we call on it, we can use it. But the questions, as you point out, the questions become greater and greater every day you operate a unit that's on the order of 65 years old.
And I guess I would say one thing that I noticed from the Burns and McDowell reports, and this is, I suppose, I just didn't want this to go without passing, was it appears EPE has done more than a commendable job maintaining this unit. So much so that you apparently cannot get rid of it.
Well, we do. I mean, I think that's a point of pride for our operations people to, if you're gonna have a generating unit, in your fleet for purposes of serving load, it's going to be capable of operating. I think that the issues, and if you look at the Burns and McDonald, life extension and analysis, a big part of what you, and a big part of the cost of what you do when you do a life extension is really inspections. It's really to get heavily into all of the steam piping and control equipment and everything else to make sure it's safe to operate the unit on a long-term basis. And so that's what you're not doing when you're maintaining it for contingency purposes, because of the cost.
I understand. Do you have any updates at this point about the status of Hecate 1 and 2 and Buena Vista 1 and 2? I know, I think the last round of testimony is, Buena Vista, those projects is May 22, and then the Hecate projects are December 22. Is that still the case?
Yes, I will certainly say with respect to Buena Vista, let me give it to my testimony here real quick.
I think I saw that at your rebuttal at 7 is my recollection. Yeah, based on current information, what is the anticipated operation dates of Hecate 1 and 2? And you indicated the Buena Vista facility is expected to begin commercial operation in May 22, and then Hecate in December 22. And I'm really just asking in the event that you got new information, and if you haven't, that's fine.
We don't have any, I won't say we have any certain updated information with any certainty. I will say that the main question here really had to do with Hecate. I've been corrected a couple of times. It doesn't rhyme with the beer. It's
okay.
Said Hecate. I was really pushing for the beer, but anyway, the Hecate, the 100, there's much greater certainty now on that date. In terms of December 22, that with the 50 megawatt portion of that, we're still in discussions with them, but there is no expectation that we would not have it available for summer of 23. So in that time frame after, it could potentially be later than 22. We're still working on that with Hecate, but we're confident that what really matters, as I think we pointed out in the testimony, is are these units available for summer peak load, and all of those units will be available. Including Newman Unit 6 for purposes of the summer peak in 23.
Great. Just one other question here. This is sort of a maintenance issue. I'll just share my screen again. So you wrote in here in page 11, again, we're looking at your, sorry, this is a supplemental testimony. I may have mistakenly said rebuttal testimony a few times, but the way I laid out all my questions was just by the different testimonies, starting with the supplemental. So for purposes of the record, if that's confusing, it's my bad. But in any case, looking at your supplemental testimony, page 11 here, you wrote, the maintenance and investment necessary to maintain RG6 in contingency for 2021 have been made, and absent any failures through summer of 21, EP expects the unit could continue in active reserve through 23 without additional expense. And I just want to confirm, really, you're saying there that whatever is needed to keep it in active reserve has really been done at this point, and barring any unforeseen, there's not really more investments that are necessary?
That's correct. And with the caveat there, as it is also reflected in the stipulation, that if we, for example, had to actually operate Rio 6 in the summer of 21, that is looking less and less likely as the summer goes on. But had we needed to do that, it could have changed that, right? We could have discovered that there were additional maintenance that we needed to do. But assuming it remains in contingency, it isn't operated to any great extent. In 21, it would continue to be available and not require any more other than just normal maintenance.
Do you have any other information at this point about at least July and August? I know this was one of the reasons that the unit was made available, was there was a concern we were going to see peak demand reflecting this COVID-20. Does EP have any additional insights at this point as to whether 2021 is looking more normal, or is it looking more like what happened during the height of the summer of COVID?
I would say it looks very much like we had even a cooler than normal summer, and that the pandemic impacts have actually lessened since 2020. And so really those two things combined, and we've moved beyond now we're pretty much through our peak season, through August. for the summer. So barring anything happening in September, we can get hot weather in September. But the expectation is, yes, we've moved past the point of concern, at least with respect to peak demand for the summer of 21.
So COVID of 2020, that was an anomaly, it looks like.
To some extent, yes. I mean, I think what we're all discovering is it could always come back. But at this point in 21, right, the impacts of the pandemic and really having to do with stay-at-home orders and having folks at home during a very hot summer, as 2020 compounded the stay-at-home orders, and drove air conditioning load. All of that is pretty much returned to normal, as I said in my testimony. And so the answer to your question is yes. 21 is looking like the pandemic effects, at least, are diminishing. And at the same time, we didn't have nearly as hot a summer this year as last year.
Great. One question I had is, the environmental considerations of the unit, the supplemental testimony included some additional information. And one of the things I was curious about, actually, just to expand upon a little bit, was you made a comment in your testimony about water use. And I think anyone who lives in the western portions of the United States who have seen pictures of Lake Mead recently are pretty much horrified. So I wonder if you could expand upon, for purposes of the benefit of the commissioners, with a unit that's as old as this, the benefits of eliminating it for purposes of water conservation. Do you have any additional comments?
I mean, no, nothing additional. That is definitely a benefit of moving from a steam turbine, the older steam turbines, to combustion turbines. Montana Power Station, which was intended to replace, among other things, intended to replace the load of Rio Grande Unit 6, is a combustion turbine, uses less water than a steam turbine does. And certainly as we move forward and have added or are adding all the units that we just finished talking about, the solar generation and Newman Unit 6, which is also combustion turbine, uses much less water to produce the same amount of power. So no, that is definitely one of the considerations, is the water consumption, and retiring Rio 6 and the other older units that will be retired as we go forward in the next several years certainly relieves the water consumption amounts for El Paso and the region.
With purposes of the failure, the risk of failure of the unit, I guess I'm asking in part just because of we had the issue of the San Juan generating station and then the collapse of that, I believe it was a cooling tower. I think the question I'm just asking is, in light of what occurred there, is failure of this unit a realistic possibility?
Well, I think it's always possible. Our judgment is obviously that we can operate it, that we can have it available to use in the summer as a contingent basis. And if it was called upon, we feel it would be safe to operate it. Certainly the cooling tower issue, as I understand it now, is really something common to a lot of much older units. And it certainly is something that we watch with Rio Grande Unit 6, and that's part of the maintenance is ensuring that all of those facilities are safe. But no, we wouldn't be offering Rio 6 even as a contingent unit if there was a safety issue.
Very good. So you wrote in your testimony that, and we don't need to look at the exact words, I can just read it. You say, conversely, the company incurs at a financial loss all non-fuel operation and maintenance costs and risks from maintaining the plant for contingency purposes. And I just want to confirm, effectively, ratepayers bear none of the costs to keep RG6 in inactive status. That's correct?
That's basically what I'm saying there, and in that they have been removed since 2015 from our both rate base and O&M expenses underlying rates. There is none included in the most recent rate case with respect to Rio 6. So it's really just customer costs are really a function only of fuel if the facility is operating.
And can I ask, how did it end up with a negative net book value?
That's actually normal the depreciation rates are calculated such that you would end up with a negative book value for purposes then of utilizing those recoveries for purposes of decommissioning and other things that you do after the unit is no longer operating. So after the unit is no longer operating, you're not recovering any revenue to cover costs, say, of decommissioning. That's the negative depreciation or the negative book value.
Is that also a consequence of the timing of all of this in between rate cases? Is that at all a function of it?
It can be. It's a function of your depreciation rates. It's a function of any incremental investments in the unit over time. It may be that you for, as you say, and the timing of cases, it may be that you get to the end of the useful life and don't have a negative book value. And that's the intent with respect to setting depreciation rates in some respects is to end up with negative book value and have those revenues available for decommissioning.
And does decommissioning and the revenues that are available for it, I mean, what does that look like exactly? I mean, does it just disappear, or where does it, once it stops being used, does it just sort of sit there like one of the car factories in Michigan?
Well, in some ways, yes. If you had our Rio Grande station, for example, is a very old power station. It sits right on the border between Texas and New Mexico on the river. And the units go all the way back to Unit 1, which I believe the building was constructed in 1940 or around there. And a lot of that facility is still there. Obviously, it's decommissioned from the perspective of those units are far from ever operating again, obviously, but the building's still there and a lot of equipment is still there. But decommissioning basically means, removing certainly all the electrical connections and fuel or any of the other any other things. But to a large extent, it's not decommissioned like for example, nuclear power plant, where decommissioning means complete removal of the power plant from the site. The power station still sits there, and obviously we still have operating units there. We recently added Unit 9 there. But generally, decommissioning means removing everything from a safety perspective, and certainly from from a perspective of things that can be used elsewhere. But generally speaking, we haven't removed everything at Rio Grande Unit 6.
You also say in your testimony that significant generation and battery energy storage is expected prior to summer 22, and even more peak capacity is expected before summer 23. And I just wanted to clarify, is this, you're referring to the Hecate 1 and 2 and the Buena Vista 1 and 2, or are there other projects that contribute to that statement?
Well, I would, in terms of our system, the largest contributor to peak load requirements is Newman Unit 6. That's the 228 megawatt gas combustion turbine. That's not certificated in New Mexico, but that statement really talks about our total system resources for serving load.
And you're correct. I didn't note Newman there, because that's effectively the fifth, if you think of Hecate and Buena Vista as two items each.
Correct.
Okay. The TCEQ proceedings. Do you have any current updated information about what's occurring there?
Yes, the ongoing proceeding at the State Office of Administrative Hearings in Texas, where we had a contested air permit for Newman Unit 6. Now, we've settled that case. I believe there have been public statements about the settlement of that case. We settled with the protesting parties, and so now that I don't know that it has been remanded back from SOA yet, but it'll now go back to TCEQ, and we expect I don't know what the timing or the expectation is about the actual issuance of the air permit, but the protest and the contested case hearing and the air permit case is over.
Great. And so I assume that means thus Newman is on track as expected.
That's correct.
You had indicated at one point in your testimony, accommodating interveners' request to postpone abandonment would include a reassessment of the condition of RG6 after summer 21 to determine if it could continue to operate. And I guess I'm just wondering, is that reassessment still necessary? Is that part of the stipulation? If you could just speak about that for a moment.
I would say yes, that we will reassess obviously after summer and looking into 22 and 23. I think the conditions of the stipulation anticipate that, and that again, with some uncertainty about how Rio 6 would actually be used in 21, may have affected what we needed to do in 22 and 23. We'll make another, we continually assess the state of the unit and the any safety issues or anything like that. So I'd say that continues, but that's a normal practice.
So Mr. Provencio in his testimony in the stipulation was talking about, and he talked about some other places in his testimony, the exact words he used, the company's practice of keeping older units available for a year or two while new ones are incorporated into the system. And the question I had for you is that an accurate statement? Or would you think that some clarification is necessary about what the company's practice is specifically?
No, I think that's accurate. We've in several proceedings have gone back and forth on really what the most reasonable utility practice is, and that certainly that has been our actual practice over the last several years as we brought in new units like Rio Grande Unit 9 and then Montana Power Station is to maintain the other units that are being replaced. Just while you integrate those new units into your system and make sure they're fully operational. So I'd say that's an accurate statement, yes.
And then finally, Mr. Provencio also included some NERC definitions as JFP stip test was attachment 1 to his stip testimony. And I just want to confirm from you, I mean, I don't know if you've looked at those, but it's basically defining what is an inactive unit, what does it mean to have a retired unit? I'm not sure if I'm saying that entirely accurately, but I just wanted to confirm that you agree that those are the sort of operative definitions here and don't contest that submission at all.
Yes, I agree. Those definitions are accurate.
Okay, that's all of my questions, Mr. Shishel. Thank you very much for appearing today. It was helpful to me.
Thank you.
So opportunity for questioning based on my questions. Yeah, Ms. Stevens, go ahead.
Yeah, I have just a few. Good morning, Mr. Schiestel. I'm going to ask you to say your name yourself because everybody's got a slightly different take on it. And I've known you for like, what, 6 years or something? I'm not sure. Would you do it for me?
I actually think the hearing examiner says it very well. Schiestel is just.
Oh, so it is that extra in there. Okay, I've got it.
Let me just chime in real quick. So Mr. Schiestel, you're German, is that correct?
Correct.
So Schiestel, if I'm not mistaken, there's a Schichtelleiter, which is like a shift supervisor. And then a Schichtel itself is a layer. At least that's what the German to English translator informed me.
Just for my clarification, it doesn't mean that Mr. Schiestel is shifty. Is that correct?
Well, I'll tell you just quickly. I don't know about your what you described there. When I was looking at going to Oktoberfest one year, going back to Germany and going to Oktoberfest, I discovered that there's actually a Schiestel Theater, spelled exactly the same way, and it's one of the venues where in Munich where the Oktoberfest is held, and it's and what they do at the Schiestel Theater is mock beheadings. So.
Germany is a wonderful place. I took a course in translation of German to English in graduate school, and I look at Goethe and try to translate that to English and have fun.
I'm not sure I'm going to be able to pull it together to ask you any questions, although I do think you still pronounce your name with less of a shh than everybody else's just now, at least the theater. No, I do appreciate the beheading thing because when my kids were little, we went to a museum of torture in Toledo, Spain. Works with boys, right? So let me getting back to something serious here. You mentioned the TCEQ settlement, and I it's not clear. Is that settlement public now? Can you answer some questions about it?
I know I saw press releases from the other parties within the, to the protested case at SOA regarding the settlement. Whether or not the settlement document itself is public, I can't tell you.
Well, then, stop me if this question is inappropriate, but does this settlement or even the permit itself, does it entail limiting the usage of any of the other units at Newman or any other EP-owned gas units in order to accommodate the output, the emissions from the planned Newman Unit 6?
I'll just say that I know that it has provisions for operations at Newman. I don't think I can speak knowledgeably about all the details of the settlement itself.
And just for the record, Ms. Stevens, my question really to Mr. Schichtel about the TCEQ proceedings was to receive the most current information relating to when Newman would open. So I'm going to stop you if you try to get into that. I would just want to know from a timing provision. That's what my question's about.
Yeah, and I was thinking more from the loads and resources issue, in terms. But if you want to stop it there, I'll stop it. It doesn't sound like Mr. Schichtel has the answer anyway. But okay, and the hearing examiner asked you about JFP Exhibit 1, JFP 1, the NERC definitions. Very early in his questioning, you when you were talking at the very, very beginning, you were talking about loads and resources tables, and you referred to the notion that once the unit is retired from regular service, it's no longer goes on the loads and resources table. This particular stipulation does not resolve questions of EPE's categorization of what is a retired unit and what is not as an inactive reserve unit, does it?
I don't believe so. I think all the stipulation resolves is the official retirement or abandonment date, I should say, for Rio Grande Unit 6. And I think I saw that as a clarification that Rio 6 would not be reflected in the LNR. I don't believe it extends to any other treatment of any other units.
And I'd like to also ask you about another of Mr. Provencio's exhibits, and I'm sorry I didn't do exhibit lists because this is supposed to be uncontested stipulation, but if you could turn to CLE Exhibit Number 1, Mr. Provencio's direct testimony. And I'm looking at Exhibit JFP 8. It's page 76 of 108 in the PDF document. Is everybody with me?
Yep.
And if you could just read that answer to yourself, I just want to ask one question. It will be in the record, so there's no need to read the whole thing into the record.
Could you give me so you said page 76?
Page 76 of 108, it's EPE's response to interrogatory CLC 1-29.
Okay, I have it.
Okay.
And just for the record, this is City of Las Cruces Exhibit Number 1.
Have you read it? I'd like to focus on the last two sentences there. And it says, hence EPE will have RG6 available to address any anomalous high peak loads in the event of unusually high market prices, which are typically associated with limited market availability of power and reliability. EPE will have the ability to bring RG6 online. And my question has to do with to what extent high market prices, you testified to Mr. Ryan that it was not going to be used as an economic dispatch resource. And my question to you is, what sort of high market prices would justify using Rio Grande 6 before it's retired, before it's abandoned, not retired? I will not go there.
I think, again, this is consistent with the designation of the unit as a contingent unit. And I think the really important language there is not so much the high market prices, but the limited market availability. And that's what I was of power. And that's what I was, when I was answering the hearing examiner's questions, pointing out that this is really about a resource that is available to us and that we can rely on, but only in those circumstances when really there's nothing else available. And so I wouldn't interpret this language as meaning, we're going to be dispatching Rio 6 with respect to economics, and that is the availability of or the price of energy available in the market. This is really about if you can't get energy in the market, and say limited market availability, under what conditions would the price be that determination? I can't tell you. And I don't know that we could tell you. I wasn't the sponsor of this exhibit, but I don't know that Mr. Waterama would add any more. I think it has more to do with just whether or not power is available in the market at all.
And I might ask Mr. Waterama if it comes up, but do you know whether, now that you also testified that we're basically hopefully through the summer peak season, do you know whether there were any periods this summer where there were extraordinarily high market prices and the company nevertheless purchased power on the market?
Not that I know of. I don't believe there were any incidents like that.
Thank you. That's my questions.
Any other follow-up questions from any other parties based on my questions?
Yes, Your Honor, I have one.
Mr. Simpson, go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Schiestel.
Good morning.
So I want to take you back to the hearing examiner. One of his first questions was regarding the cost of gas. And I was just kind of fiddling while we were talking, and I want to make sure I did the calculation correctly. We're talking about the cost of power from Rio 6 being based solely on the cost of gas, correct?
Well, more specifically, the cost to customers of power from Rio 6 being a function of the cost of gas. In other words, if it's operated, produces kilowatt hours that are provided to New Mexico customers, the fuel cost, the natural gas cost would be reflected in the FPPCAC.
Okay. I just wanted to walk through the calculation quickly to make sure I understand it. So the cost that is shown in EPE 3 at the top of page 3, 12,400 BTUs per kilowatt hour. So if we wanted to translate that into dollars per megawatt, just for example, let's say that natural gas costs $3 a decatherm. A decatherm is roughly equivalent to 1 million BTUs, correct?
I don't know.
Okay, well, I believe that's the approximate conversion factor. It varies a little bit with the quality of the gas, I think, but let's say that it is a decatherm is 1 million BTUs, and the decatherm costs $3. Then you would just multiply $3 per million BTUs by 12,400 BTUs per kilowatt hour,
the heat rate.
Right, and that comes out to 37 cents per kilowatt hour, and then multiply it by 1,000 to get megawatt hours. So you'd have $37.2 per megawatt hour. Can you confirm that's
It sounds
the
correct.
correct way to do that calculation?
It sounds correct.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
Okay, any other questions based on my questions? Thank you very much, Mr. Schichtel, for appearing today, sir.
My pleasure. Thank you.
You're
Have a good day.
excused. Okay, Mr. Wexler will go to Mr. Gallegos, if that's acceptable.
That's correct, Your Honor, and Ms. Kessler will be presenting Mr. Gallegos.
Thank you very much.
And if you'll give us a few minutes, we'll get switched here in our hearing room.
That's fine. Why don't we just take would 5 minutes be useful?
Yes.
Let's do that. Just a quick 5 minute break. So I have 10:01. Let's come back at 10:06. So we'll go off the record for 5 minutes. Okay, it's 10:06. We'll go back on the record. Ms. Kessler, well, we're missing some of our characters here. We'll give one more minute to see if we get some videos started up. There we go. Why don't we just get started? The rest of the folks will come in if they need to. So go ahead, Ms. Kessler.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Hearing Examiner, and good morning, Mr. Gallegos. Can you hear me?
Yes, good morning.
Can you please state your name for the record and spell it for the court reporter?
Sure, Omar Gallegos, O-M-A-R, last name Gallegos, G-A-L-L-E-G-O-S.
What is your profession with EPE?
I'm the Senior Director of Resource Planning at El Paso Electric.
Thanks. And do you have in front of you what's been marked as EPE Exhibit Number 8?
Yes, I do.
Do you recognize that document?
Yes, I do. It's my direct testimony in this docket.
Thank you. Was that drafted by you or under your supervision?
Yes, it was.
Do you have any corrections to your testimony?
Yes, I do have one correction on my direct testimony on page 9 on table OG-3. For the year of 2018, the value should instead read 55,642.
Is that correction included in the hearing exhibit today?
Yes, I believe it is.
In red line form? Thank you. With that correction, is the direct testimony that you prepared true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes, it is.
And if you were asked these questions this morning, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Okay, Mr. Hearing Examiner, I'd offer EP Exhibit Number 8.
Are there any objections?
No.
Very good. We'll admit EP Exhibit 8.
Thanks. Mr. Gallegos, do you have before you what has been marked as EP Exhibit Number 9?
Yes, I do.
What is that document?
That is the rebuttal testimony, my rebuttal testimony in this docket.
Was it drafted by you or under your direction and supervision?
Yes, it was.
Do you have any corrections to that rebuttal testimony?
No, I do not.
Is that testimony true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes.
And if you were asked these questions today under oath, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Thanks. Mr. Hearing Examiner, I'd offer EP Exhibit Number 9.
Objections? Exhibit 9 EPE is admitted.
Thanks. And I'll move to Exhibit 10. Mr. Gallegos, do you have Exhibit 10 in front of you?
Yes, I do.
Do you recognize that document?
Yes, it's my supplemental testimony in this docket.
Do you have any corrections to your supplemental testimony?
No, I do not.
Is your supplemental testimony true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes, it is.
And if you were asked those same questions this morning under oath, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Mr. Hearing Examiner, I'll offer EP Exhibit Number 10.
Any objections? Okay, Exhibit 10 EPE is admitted.
Thank you. And with that, I'll tender Mr. Gallegos.
Hello, Mr. Gallegos. How are you?
Very good. Yourself?
Fine, thank you. So I'm just going to share. What I'm going to share is actually, we can look at the numbers on screen. You've seen this before, but this is going to be the City of Las Cruces, Exhibit 1, the direct testimony of Jose Provencio. It's JFP 1. Here, I'll pull it up on screen. So this was a document that the city submitted. I guess it's a PUC of Texas, Public Utility Commission. And this shows total O&M costs. You can see that, right, Mr. Gallegos?
Yes.
So I just wanted to ask you. So these numbers here that I just highlighted with my, it's the row going across from Rio Grande 6. So are those the operating and maintenance costs for those years? For Rio Grande 6? I mean, I just want to confirm that's the case.
I I'm not familiar with this document and how they put it together, but it appears to be that that's what it identifies as the O&M cost for those units.
Okay, so you've not seen this before? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I've seen it. I'm just not sure of its origins, and I wasn't involved with putting together that information for whichever proceeding Mr. Provencio pulled it from. So I'm not familiar with, what's behind the numbers.
Okay, but I guess as far as representing what the operation and maintenance costs for the Rio Grande 6 was for those years, I mean, I think your testimony was that it ultimately comes out to, and I forget the total date range, it's like $14 million. Do you recall what years those were between, off the top of your head?
I think I was requested that information in as part of it might have been in my supplemental, but I don't remember. But I know it went back several years because I had to request that total to be pulled together.
Yeah.
It sounds about right what you're saying, because it was several years back from about like 2009, maybe potentially.
Yeah, I think that was the case. Okay. All right, I'll take that down.
I think it's here on Exhibit 10 on page 6.
Yeah, let me pull that up real quickly too. EP 10. I have that up and it's page 6. Yes. Yeah, right. The capital and operation maintenance expenses for RG6 from 2007 through 2021 is approximately $14 million. And the question I was going to ask, based on that chart that Mr. Provencio submitted, was whether you have the ability to kind of talk about what those expenses were, but it sounds like you wouldn't be able to because you didn't create that document.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm not certain exactly what went into that. I do know that, I mean, each year, if they were to do summer preps and things of that sort, when there was active reserve, those type of activities would go in there. But, Mr. Guadarrama could probably explain more what type of O&M activities go on a yearly basis for a unit. That's, back then, from 2007 through 20, mid 20 something, 10s, 15s, it would have been active reserve. And so he would know what they would do to maintain that.
Okay. So just generally speaking, is it common for a unit to be extended as RG6 has for 13 years beyond its extended life? Or is this an unusual case to some extent?
So I believe in the industry, it's probably not very common. I think that El Paso Electric does have quite a few units that are older and that have been extended past their original. It's been relatively common for our practice that some of these are extended beyond the original dates. When compared to what we see in the industry, I think it's probably beyond the norm of when units are finally abandoned and retired.
Okay. I do want to just go back to 1 second, 4S. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen again. This is just the loads and resources table that you supplied with this is OG-4S we're looking at on screen. And I think this is part of your supplemental testimony, correct?
Correct, yes.
Yeah. And this was responsive to the bench request questions. And I'll zoom in a little bit because it's hard to, I just want to confirm that when I read this document, I'm reading it correctly. So if I understand the testimony, this Rio Grande for 2021, the 271, that does not include RG6. Is that right?
Correct. It does not include RG6.
That's all. I just wanted to have that confirmed on the record. The other question I had about this, I was noticing, and again, this gets back to this question about purchase power and, the debate that was occurring initially in this case about, keeping RG6 available for an active reserve. But these purchase power numbers, there's some consistency, like the number 284 appears on 3 occasions. The numbers are all in the mid to high 200 numbers. It just made me wonder whether or not this is is there a purchase power amount that EPE shoots for?
Right, and I would, I guess I would describe that a little bit further in terms of rows 2.1 through 2.4 on that exhibit are purchase power that is secured through long-term purchase power agreements. So
okay,
they're not purchases off of the market. 2.5 would be the line item that we utilize to denote purchase power from the market. Typically, from a long-term planning horizon, we look to keep that number at approximately 125 megawatts normally. That when we look at how much power we feel we can depend on being available in the market during a peak period, we wouldn't want to be going over the 125 megawatts, because that is in line with the amount of firm transmission capability that we have for importing power into our system. I will state that 2021 is higher because of that unusual load growth that we had in 2020 that was talked about a little bit earlier. And so there was an adjustment and a step up due to that on the load forecast, which, as you pointed out and inquired with Mr. Shisto, how 2021 is faring, right? So our norm is 125 megawatts, what we plan for from a long-term planning perspective that we would like to be at or under.
Okay, thank you for correcting me too. I appreciate you sharing how to, part of it is just for me trying to understand how to read these charts and then whatever I can discern from them. So appreciate that.
No problem.
All right, so this is your rebuttal testimony. Let me pull that up. And at page, I'll share the screen again so we all see it together. So this question was, is it expected that RG6 will be needed for 2021 to meet peak loads? And I just actually want you to maybe help me understand what the answer is. No, EPE has sufficient firm resources and firm transmission import capability over WEC Path 47 to meet forecasted firm load. And then it says an additional 106 megawatts of purchase power may be required to meet planning reserve margins, which may be required if available in southern New Mexico within WEC Path 47 or through the use of non-firm transmission. So could you just unpack this a little bit more for me, Mr. Gallegos?
Certainly. So we're connected to the web markets via what's referred to as WEC Path 47.
Okay.
And WEC Path 47 has a defined limitation as to the amount of firm transmission that can be scheduled on a firm basis on that path. And so when we look at the amount of firm resources that we have available locally, plus the amount of import capability that we have across Path 47, that in conjunction with the potential need. And so again, this statement is looked at a peak load day, right? So, we're looking at the peak load day of the year if it were to materialize as projected in the forecast, right? Based on our knowledge of 2020. So looking at a peak load date of that sort, there is a potential that we would need to purchase an additional 106 megawatts of purchase power within that WEC Path 47 on this side of those transmission tie lines to support some of those peak levels. We would be able to meet, we would be able to meet our requirements for those peak days for planning reserve. The one thing, and I'm sorry, let me distinguish between operating reserves and planning reserve requirements. From a long-term planning perspective, we plan to have enough resources to meet load plus a planning reserve margin. The planning reserve margin up until now has been 15% of our peak load projection. That planning reserve amount allows us to absorb anomalies such as unforeseen multiple contingencies or unforeseen huge increases in load that may not be foreseen or projected. So when we look at 2020, the planning reserve margin served its purpose of allowing us to be able to satisfy that huge load increase. When we get into an operating year, we operate we make operating decisions to operating reserves. So we're already in the year, and those operating reserves can range between 7 to 8% of our load for that day. So given the amount of resources that we have available locally, plus given our firm transmission import that we have capability for, we have enough resources to meet the operating reserves of a peak day, to meet load and operating reserves.
And could you just clarify when you were referring to firm resources and firm transmission versus non-firm and non-firm resources, non-firm transmission? Can you just clarify for me?
Certainly on the transmission scheduling, the FERC allows, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission allows for non-firm transmission to be scheduled. In essence, non-firm transmission can come about in two different ways. Either somebody reserved capacity for transmission on a firm basis and is not utilizing it. And so then it becomes available as non-firm transmission that's available out there for folks to schedule on. You can almost think of it as, airlines double booking seats. Somebody pays for the seats, but then if they don't show up, they'll sell that seat again. So that's one way that non-firm transmission may be available.
And is non-firm, is that effectively stating that it doesn't have an owner at this juncture, or it was purchased and then someone didn't show up, to use your airline seat metaphor? Could you just clarify just slightly further?
Correct, right. To some degree, that's what it means. And the important takeaway from that is that that person that reserved the capacity and paid for the capacity on a firm basis can choose to use it at any time. So if someone scheduled non-firm, and then that person that paid for firm shows up 40 minutes before the hour and says, I'm going to use it now, they would bump off the non-firm schedules. So I think that's more of the connotation of non-firm, is that you're not guaranteed to have it. It may be out there on a non-firm basis, but
is it correct to think that, like with firm and non-firm planning, you're sort of talking like futures contracts where you lock in at a rate and you're sort of just kind of taking a gamble? Is that the basic concept going on here?
Yeah, so from a long-term planning perspective, we don't utilize the non-firm because there's a gamble. There's no guarantee that it would be available.
Right.
So, we on a day-to-day basis and kind of looking if it's being utilized, we do utilize non-firm. The other way that non-firm transmission can become available is depending on the flows. If there's power flows going east to west that are offsetting the flows coming west to east, it actually allows for there to be more flow on the lines to be scheduled. But again, it's contingent on what is happening in that day. Again, same thing. If some of those counter flows were to be canceled, then the non-firm capability goes away. So, non-firm is sometimes there to use on a day-to-day basis, but we do not utilize that from a planning perspective because we don't like to take the gamble that it may not be available.
And then with the firm, I'm assuming that you lock in the price when you sign is that correct? When you agree to it?
For people that are purchasing firm transmission, yes. Some of the firm transmission that we have allocated to us is allocated to us to serve native load. So for example, our firm capabilities on WECPath 47, we're not paying for it because it's our assets that we have to serve native customers. But yes, if someone were purchasing firm transmission, they pay for the firm transmission, and barring a forced outage where the line is no longer available, that would be the only thing that can make a firm transmission not available, is if there's a reliability event that makes it not available, or if the unit goes out of service because of a downed pole structure or something to that effect. Yeah,
so I appreciate you doing that. It's a lot of information in those paragraph right there, and I'm happy that you just went through it with me. And I'm sure I'll have more questions in the future, but it was helpful to hear you explain that. Thank you.
Certainly. Thank you.
All right. So I asked Mr. Shisha this question too, and at one point in your rebuttal testimony, you talked about, and I'm not asking you to exactly the exact words, but you say at one point, there will be additional information available once actual 2021 peak loads have been determined and the continued assessment of Buena Vista and Hecate schedules. So I guess I'm just wondering if you have any other updates beyond what Mr. Shisha talked about with summer loads in the months that have just passed.
No, I think he captured it accurately to what I understand. Also, the loads have not been at the same levels as 2020. They've been a little bit lower, in part maybe due to the temperatures. And then yeah, he gave an accurate update on the resources also.
And would you agree? I mean, one of the questions I asked in the case was I was trying to sort of understand predictively what are the associated expenses of operation and maintenance for RG6 moving forward. And what Mr. Shishel said this morning was effectively it's really not, you can't exactly quantify it because we just don't know. And I guess I just would ask you the same question because you talked about this in your testimonies. Is that EPA's position that, you know, basically whatever the costs of, if this thing had to be run, we just can't say at this juncture what that's going to cost?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, you know, I think that there's been an assessment to ensure that we can operate it safely. And so that's some of the work that has already been done to prepare it for operation in 2021. What we don't know is if, you know, there's boiler tubes or other things that just depending on how much we use it, you know, will they experience a leak or not and require more repairs? Will other pumps go out? You know, there's some things that'll just, you know, suddenly fail in terms of like pumps and things of that sort. So we just don't know, you know, just given the age, if any of those things will occur, depending on how much we run that unit.
Okay. So that's all of my questions for you, Mr. Gallegos. I directed a lot of my inquiry to Mr. Shishtel, so there's only a few questions here. Are there any parties who have any follow-up questions based on what I asked Mr. Gallegos? Great, Mr. Gallegos, thank you very much for appearing today.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
You as well. Mr. Wadarama now, Mr. Wexler. Oh, I guess we'll
That's
probably
correct, Your Honor. Yeah, again, they've turned off their video because it'll take just a moment for Mr. Gallegos to leave and Mr. Guadarrama to come on in.
Oh, up there. There.
Okay. Mr. Wadarama, are you all set, sir?
I believe so. Yes, sir. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Guadarrama. How are you?
Good morning.
Oh, and I'm sorry, we need to have the witness sworn in.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Could you please state your name for the record and spell it for the court reporter?
My name is Jose Guadarrama, and it's Jose. Guadarrama is Guaderrama.
Thank you. Do you have before you what's been marked as EPE Exhibit Number 5? That's your direct testimony.
Yes, sir, I do.
Was that direct testimony prepared by you or under your direct supervision?
Yes, sir, it was.
Do you have any corrections?
No, sir, I don't.
If you look at the inside cover under the heading exhibits, you have identified 4 exhibits. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And those are exhibits that you're familiar with and that you're testifying to?
Yes, sir.
Is the testimony contained in EP Exhibit Number 5 true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
Exhibit 5?
I believe that's your direct testimony that we're talking about.
Yes, sir. Yes, that's correct.
And if the questions contained in Exhibit 5 were posed to you this morning, would you give the same answers?
Yes, sir, I would.
I move the admission of EPE Exhibit Number 5.
Any objections? We'll admit EPE 5.
Mr. Guadarrama, do you have before you what's been marked as EPE Exhibit Number 6? That's your rebuttal testimony dated June 28th, 2021.
Yes, sir, I do.
And was that rebuttal testimony also prepared by you or under your direct supervision?
Yes, sir, it was.
Any corrections to EPE Exhibit 6?
None, no, sir.
Is EPE Exhibit 6 true and correct to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes, sir, it is.
And if you were posed the same questions contained in EPE 6 this morning under oath, would you give the same answers?
Yes, sir, I would.
I move the admission of EPE Exhibit 6.
Any objections? EPE Exhibit 6 is admitted.
All right, Mr. Guadarrama. And finally, EPE Exhibit 7 is your supplemental testimony dated July 12th, 2021. Do you have that before you?
Yes, sir.
And was that supplemental testimony also prepared by you or under your direct supervision?
Yes, it was.
Any corrections?
None, sir.
Is EPE Exhibit 7 your supplemental testimony true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
Yes, it is. Yes, sir.
And if you were asked the same questions contained in EPE 7 this morning under oath, would you give the same answers?
Yes, sir.
All right, then we also would move EPE Exhibit Number 7, the supplemental testimony of Mr. Guadarrama.
Any objections? EPE 7 is also admitted.
With that, we'll make Mr. Guadarrama available for questions.
Terrific. And I actually, before I speak to Mr. Guadarrama, I would note, I think we may have forgotten to swear Mr. Gallegos in. That was probably just an oversight on my part. I assume if anyone has objections, they'll raise them now. Didn't think so. Just noting that for the record. All right, Mr. Guadarrama, how are you, sir?
I'm well, sir. Thank you. And yourself?
Good, thank you. Let me bring this screen up here. So here's your direct testimony, Mr. Guadarrama. You said, this is page 9 of Mr. Guadarrama's direct testimony, EP 5. There are several auxiliary components that would need to be replaced if the unit were to continue operations, i.e. the cooling tower requires significant repair and was operated with 2 of the cooling cells out of service in the last 2 operating cycles. Additionally, feed water heaters are in need of retubing. The generator is in need of a couple inspection and electrical condition testing. And the steam turbine and generator are due for a complete inspection. So then that 7 you say EPE Exhibit 7, this is page 3. The largest single expense in the preparation of RG6 for summer 21 were the structural repairs needed to ensure the cooling tower would be operational. This accounted for approximately $500,000 in repairs. An additional 100,000 was spent. So I guess it sounds like between Exhibit 5 and Exhibit 7, some things were done actually to get it up and running. And I just kind of wanted you to clarify for me what has been done on this unit and where we are in terms of what needs to be done moving forward. Because I understand Mr. Shishel said there should be no more need for maintenance expenses.
Yes, sir. Prior to this summer, in preparation for the summer, we actually structurally supported the cooling tower and made some repairs to some of the mechanical equipment, some of the fans and some of the piping and things like that, which that was actually our biggest concern at the time going into this summer. That has been addressed, as have any other known issues to this point. So right now, as we stand, that unit is in good shape for contingency calling.
Okay. And would you agree, Mr. Shishel's statement in his testimony that barring any unforeseen events, no further investments should be necessary?
There's nothing that we know of that should be done if we run the unit as a contingency unit at a known threat to reliability. If we wanted to upgrade the unit further, we would have to perform a significant amount of maintenance to get it in that condition.
Okay. I asked Mr. Shishel a very broad question just about water consumption and the environmental considerations. I don't know if you heard his response, but if you wish to expand upon that anyway, it seemed to me an important subject. And if you have any other comments to offer, you can do so, or if not, that's fine.
The unit is what we would call a traditional steam turbine generating unit, thermal unit. It does use a significant amount of cooling water to cool the steam. As a result of that, new technologies do not call for that, or they call for a minimum amount of water relatively. So there's an additional consumption of water per megawatt of generation on these older units, which would go away with newer technology. As far as the environmental impact, Newman's Rio Grande 6 has absolutely no emission controls, emission cleanup technology attached to it. So it's just basically burn the fuel and exhaust the gases out the stack. So it is, new technology is a much cleaner for the environment application.
And my understanding of the stipulation, and well, let's not put it that way. I mean, it seemed to me in the commission's metrics in terms of why would we want to retire this, that fact is a significant reason to retire this unit. The complete non-existence of pollution controls. I mean, it's sort of shocking when you hear something like that, right? I mean, that's not good.
It should certainly be a big consideration. Yes, sir.
Very good. And I mean, I don't want to have extensive discussion about this, but I'm hearing you say that the newer units that you're bringing online, and I assume the Newman 6 would be this case. It's a significant improvement from what was available in the 1950s.
That's correct. All of Newman 5, actually all of the units that we have built since then have, not all of them, but all of the Newman units certainly have some control technology for emissions.
Okay. I asked Mr. Shishel, or I pointed this out to Mr. Shishel, the reports that you submitted from Burns and McDowell, and I believe I'm saying that correctly. Burns and McDonnell, excuse me.
Yes, sir.
They commended EPE's maintenance program. Do you guys go above and beyond? Is that what those reports are indicating?
Essentially, since I've been here 45 years. Since I've been here, we have always been very, very thorough with our maintenance, not to the extent that we go overboard, but we try to be as prudent as we can and manage the maintenance dollars that we have allocated and try to spend them in the right place at the right time. So yes, sir, we're pretty proud of that.
And a last question for you, sir, is just in terms of this consideration of, keeping it in an active reserve status. Obviously, you can't know the costs, you can't know the risks that are there, because there potentially are things that you haven't discovered that could be problematic moving forward. I guess if you could just comment as the person speaking to the technical aspects of this unit, do you think that the risks of keeping in this status are not outweighed by the benefits accrued from keeping it as an inactive unit? You understand my question?
I think I understand, and I'll answer what I understand, but I know that keeping the unit as a contingency unit, we're not going to abandon it. We're going to put Band-Aids on it. We're going to repair it where it's needed. We're going to repair pumps that are needed. But we are going to be somewhat cautious about how and where we spend these dollars. They should be very minimum. And the reason I say that is because most of our expenditures have been spent in preparation for this summer, thinking that it would be the last summer. But I am confident that as a contingency unit, this unit can be there for a couple more years, a couple more summers. We just manage it very prudently. We operate it with caution, and on a contingency basis, we should be able to get that done with minimal expenditure.
Okay, that's exactly what I was looking to hear you say. So that's all the question I have for Mr. Wadarama. Are there any follow-up questions from any of the other parties? Ms. Stevens. Have to unmute yourself, Ms. Stevens. Still have to unmute yourself. You can hit Control A, I think. Maybe not. There's a quick key on Zoom. So Ms. Stevens is having technical difficulties here. There she goes.
I had to move my mouse pad to get my mouse over to the second screen. I'm sorry. It's pathetic. Now my mouse pad is disintegrating. Good morning, Mr. Wadarama. I'm Anastasia Stevens for the City of Las Cruces. I have just one question to follow up on the last very interesting information you said about using Rio Grande 6 for a contingency unit this summer and for possibly another couple of summers. And that is, has it been used this summer?
Yes, ma'am. It's been used it was used for testing. We wanted to make sure that we address the issues going into the summer. And it's actually online right now because we're having this kind of return of the heat wave, I guess, if you want to call it that. And we also have Unit 5 down at Newman, or have had it down for the last few days for unexpected, unplanned maintenance.
Thank you. That's my only question. Appreciate it.
And I have a follow-up on that. So apart from what you've just said as to the unit's use, has it been used? Because I thought I understood Mr. Schichtel to say that it hasn't been operated to serve load in any way since 2018. But you're saying that was not, and I may have misheard, so I'm not going to say that that's what he said, but the record will reflect this. But you are saying it has been used to serve load.
It has been used for as exactly as what we defined it as, a contingency. We've had this issue that just came up about 3 days ago. We had to take Unit 5 down at Newman. And we were potentially at risk of having to interrupt customers. And so we did put the unit on in preparation for that, and we were able to avoid all of that. But yes, sir, that's a recent thing that Mr. Schiestel may not have been aware of.
I see. And I'm not, I understand. And it functioned reliably and did what it needed to do?
Yes, sir. It'll be coming off here. The Unit 5 is coming back probably this afternoon, and the unit will be taken off after that.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate you, Ms. Stevens, asking that question. Anything further from Mr. Waterama? Sir, you're excused. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, and everyone have a good day.
You as well. So I thought we could just go in the order that I described when we met, when I came in and I did my appearances. So I had the applicant, El Paso Electric, the next, and that was all of El Paso Electric's witness, Mr. Wexler. Yep.
That's correct.
So I think Ms. Stevens, can we go to the city now? Is that acceptable?
I think that we're next. And Mr. Provencio, if you would unmute yourself. I hope you do this better than I did.
And Ms. Gonzalez, if you could swear in Mr. Provencio.
You bet. Raise your right hand, sir. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Provencio. Would you give your full name for the record, please?
Certainly. Jose Provencio,
And your position?
Deputy Director, Business Services for the Utilities Department in the City of Los Cruces.
Do you have in front of you a document that's been marked CLC Exhibit Number 1?
Yes, I do.
And is that the direct testimony of Jose F. Provencio on behalf of the City of Las Cruces filed on June 7th, 2021?
Yes, it is.
Did you, was that testimony prepared by you or under your direct supervision?
Yes, it was.
Is it true, is the testimony and the attached exhibits true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
Yes, it is.
Do you have any changes to make?
No, I do not.
If I were to ask you the same questions today under oath, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
The city moves to admit CLC Exhibit Number 1, Mr. Provencio's direct testimony.
Any objections? CLC 1 is admitted.
And now let's turn to a document labeled CLC Exhibit Number 2. Do you have that in front of you, Mr. Provencio?
Yes, I do.
And is that, I'm going to look for the right title on it. Is that the testimony that you prepared in response to the July 6th bench request in this case?
Yes, it is.
And was that prepared by you or under your direct supervision?
Yes, it was.
Do you have any corrections to make?
No, I do not.
Is it true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
Yes, it is.
Would you give the same answers today under oath as you did on July the 6th?
Yes, I would.
The city moves to admit CLC Exhibit Number 2, Mr. Provencio's responses to the bench request.
Any objections?
And the last document we have.
That's admitted, by the way.
I'm sorry, I cut you off.
That's okay. No worries.
You know, we thought about in the other case trying to do these all at once, and one by one seems to be better, but tedious. Do you have in front of you a document that's marked CLC Exhibit Number 3, Mr. Provencio?
Yes, I do.
And is that your testimony in support of the stipulation that was filed on August the 16th, 2021?
Yes, yes, it is.
Was that prepared by you under your direct supervision?
Yes, it was.
Are the answers, is that testimony true, correct, and accurate to the best of your knowledge?
Yes, they are.
Would you give the same answers to those questions today?
Yes, I would.
The city moves to admit CLC Exhibit Number 3, Mr. Provencio's testimony in support of the uncontested comprehensive stipulation.
Any objections? CLC Exhibit 3 is admitted.
With that, I tender Mr. Provencio for your questioning. Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Provencio. How are you?
Good morning, Mr. Hearing Examiner. I'm fine.
So I have only one question, Mr. Provencio, and I guess I want to just to ask you to comment generally. It's not a gotcha question at all. It's just generally speaking. So if the commission were to ask, why are they now permitted to take the RG6 off the loads and resources table? And I've heard answers to this question, but I just want to know, as a fact matter from your perspective, Mr. Provencio, why is that the correct thing moving forward?
The main driver would be as consequences and situations El Paso Electric has faced, they've petitioned or requested that they extend the life or they extend the availability of Rio Grande number 6 for those noted reasons that have been provided in testimony by especially by El Paso Electric. However, with its known outcome as this contingency coverage or situation for the need for Rio Grande number 6, that it should be, the cards are on the table as in terms of at a time that for any planning purposes in the future, that it should not be part of the any planning processes. This is a temporary situation, beset by some unexpected events, and it's totally reasonable that this is just a temporary consequence.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's all the questions I have for Mr. Provencio. I assume there's no follow-up questions based on that question. Mr. Provencio, you're excused, sir. Thank you for appearing today.
You're welcome, sir. Have a good day.
You as well. Miss LaRock I see her muted. She is with us. There we go.
There you are.
Ms.
Okay.
Gonzalez, if you could just swear her in.
You bet. Raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Good morning, Ms. LaRock. How are you?
Good. Fine, thank you.
Would you please give your full name and your title for the record?
Do you want me to spell it as well?
It depends. We have so many issues here with spellings and pronunciations. Yours is one of them.
Okay. My name is Lisa LaRock. I'm the Sustainability Officer for the City of Las Cruces.
And do you have in front of you a document that's been marked Clc Exhibit Number 4?
I do.
Is that your direct testimony in this case filed on June the 7th, 2021?
It is.
Was that prepared by you or under your direct supervision?
Yes.
Is that testimony in the attached exhibits true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
Yes.
If you were asked the same questions today, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
The city moves to admit Exhibit 4, Ms. LaRock's direct testimony.
Any objections? CLC Exhibit 4 is admitted.
And let me move to CLC 5. And do you have in front of you a document that's been marked CLC Exhibit Number 5?
Yes.
Is that the testimony of Lisa LaRock on behalf of the City of Las Cruces in response to July 6, 2021 bench request, which was submitted on July 12th, 2021?
Yes.
And was that prepared by you or under your direct supervision?
Yes.
Are the answers, is the information in your testimony and exhibits true and correct to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes.
If I asked you the same questions today, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
The city moves to admit CLC Exhibit 5, Ms. LaRock's testimony in response to the bench request.
Any objections? CLC Exhibit 5 is admitted.
And lastly, do you have in front of you a document that's been marked CLC Exhibit Number 6?
Yes.
And is that your testimony in support of the unopposed comprehensive stipulation in this case?
Yes.
That was filed on August the 16th, 2021?
Yes.
Was that prepared by you or under your direct supervision?
Yes.
Are the answers in that testimony true and correct? True and correct to the best of your knowledge?
Yes.
Would you give the same answers to those questions today under oath?
Yes.
The city moves to admit CLC Exhibit Number 6, Ms. LaRock's testimony in support of the stipulation.
Any objections? CLC 6 is admitted.
Pass the witness for examination by the hearing
you.
examiner.
Yeah, just two questions, Ms. LaRock. So this is your testimony in support of unopposed comprehensive stipulation, which is CLC Exhibit 6, just admitted. And I highlighted some text there at lines 2 through 6 of page 6. And so EPE will not be required to include Rio Grande Unit 6 on its loads and resources documents, which makes sense for resource planning purposes because of the turnaround time for selecting generation resources, obtaining regulatory approvals, and constructing the new facilities. I guess I'm just kind of wondering, Ms. LaRock, if you could explain that a little further and then, just tell me how that sort of is responsive to the commission's order in previous, the 18 to whatever it was case in which they said there's a consideration about underreporting of or understating the amount of load available or amount of generation available and the risk of over procuring. Do you understand what I've just asked?
I think, no, would you like to rephrase it?
Yeah, sure. So when I read the case, the 2018 case, and it said the concern with not making them have it on the loads and resource tables is they're not sort of presenting the full picture of what's available. And I understood, and they kept on their loads and resources table, they kept RG6. And then you say here, well, they should not be required to keep this on their loads and resources table moving further for resource planning purposes. And you talk about the turnaround time for selecting generation resources and obtaining regulatory approvals and then constructing the facilities. And I guess that just isn't really responsive to why the commission actually initially ordered BPE to do this. And I'm asking you if you have anything further you wish to say as to why it makes sense for EPE to remove it from their loads and resources table or to explain this response and just unpack that a little bit, what you've said.
What I feel that the stipulation was able to do was to be able to clearly designate Rio Grande 6 as a contingency resource for a given amount of time while there was for the transition for new resources to be put on in operation, and that the fact that it was not because it's a contingency and it has clear plans of not being part of our generation portfolio, it seemed logical to remove that from the loads and resources documents and focus on the planning needs for the future, because planning takes so long to do, and the whole process that you have for approval and constructing those details. It's the idea that there is a clear pathway for Rio Grande 6 that made it seem viable that the loads that it wouldn't be included in the loads and resources. Did that help?
It did. Thank you. No, I think it was actually the first step in it to say, well, now that we've all acknowledged that this unit sits in a certain status in which it's not being used, thus it makes no sense to put it on the loads and resource table. And then the second part you say is the planning part. And so I understand that. And I just wanted to get the city to say that on the record. So the only other question I have for you, Ms. LaRock, would be, do you agree that there's significant environmental benefits to retiring this unit?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought so. Thank you, Ms. LaRock.
No problem. Thank you.
So Ms. LaRock's excused unless there's anyone follow-ups on what I've asked there. Very good. Thank you, Ms. LaRock.
Thank you.
Okay, those are the city's witnesses. We would go to intervener Doñana County, but they presented no witnesses. So Ms. Beatles, but she's not here. Ms. Souls, let's do you.
Yes, sir. Good morning.
How are you? Let me just get your.
I'm good. Thank you.
Good. So the exhibit list you submitted, Ms. Souls, just for clarification, all those exhibits are actually like attachments to Exhibit 9. That's what that's reflecting, right? Yeah. Okay, so let's do this. Direct testimony of Mary Lee Souls. Okay, Miss.
Do you want me to swear her in?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it,
Okay.
Ms. Gonzalez.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
So Ms. Souls, I'm looking at a document that's entitled The Direct Testimony of Mary Lee Souls. The date is June 7, 2021. You've identified this as Mary Lee Souls Exhibit 9. You familiar with this document?
I am.
Just out of curiosity, why is this MLS Exhibit 9?
When I filed my direct testimony, I included exhibits MLS 01 through MLS 08. So those exhibits are included as part of exhibit MLS-09.
That's fine. I'm just asking really for the record, so in case anyone was curious. You prepared MLS 09, I assume?
I did.
And are the statements in there true and accurate to the best of your knowledge?
They are.
And if I was to ask you these questions now, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
And do you have any corrections to offer? Are there any corrections reflected in the documents you shared on
I don't believe so.
Dropbox? You didn't indicate, you didn't make any corrections.
I did not make any corrections.
Very good. Okay, so I'll move for exhibit of MLS 9. MLS 9 will be admitted. And then Ms. Souls, I'm looking at a document entitled The Testimony of Mary Lee Souls in Support of the Comprehensive Stipulation. It has a date of August 16, 2021. You've identified this as exhibit number 10. Are you familiar with this document?
I am.
And did you prepare this document?
Yes.
And is the information provided in this document true and accurate to the best of your knowledge?
It is.
And if these questions, if you were asked them now, would you answer them in the same fashion?
I would.
And have you made any corrections to this document between the time it was first submitted and what you are now submitting at this hearing?
No.
Okay, so I will move for the admission of MLS 10. Any objections? I don't hear any, so I will admit MLS 10. And Souls, I guess I'll just ask you, since you're the only other party who submitted testimony in this case. You've heard me ask the question several times about removing it from the loads and resources table. Can you just comment upon that if you have anything to add to what you've heard so far? Removing RG6 from the loads and resource table.
I would observe that the loads and resources table as a planning document does include a reconciliation of a planning reserve margin. I continue to be confused about the purpose of a planning reserve margin versus utilization of a unit on a contingency basis. As described by Mr. Guadarrama, currently with Newman 5 not operational, that it was a happy coincidence that Rio Grande 6 is available and is being utilized today. I'm agreeing with the stipulation because the plan would be that Rio Grande 6 would be abandoned at the end of the peak season in 2023. Because of the timing, any planning purposes would be occurring after that point in time. And therefore, for me, I would observe that the congruence of planning for resource requirements after 2023 and the intended abandonment date approved by the commission after the summer peak season of 2023 match appropriately. I would also emphasize what I believe the city pointed out, which is that the stipulation applies for the purpose of Rio Grande 6 only. And I think there's some real questions for the commission going forward in terms of how they expect planning for adequacy of resources to occur around the question of abandonment. So I don't feel that that question is settled in the bigger picture. I do believe that for the specific purpose of abandonment of Rio Grande 6 at the end of the summer peak season of 2023, and with the appropriate recognition that if some key new resources are not finished construction and operational for that summer peak season, that abandonment of Rio Grande 6 would be postponed. That was for me a key stipulation, a key portion and consideration of the stipulation.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Souls. Any question, any follow-up based on what Ms. Souls just said? Thank you, Ms. Souls, you're excused. Well, you'll continue participating anyway. So that I believe is all the testimony. Let me go back to this. Mr. Simpson. Oh, no, sorry, it is not all testimony. Staff, we have to have Mr. Sidler. So Mr. Simpson did not submit any testimony in this case. He is appearing as a pro se intervener in this proceeding. However, Mr. Black, staff's testimony.
Thank you, hearing examiner. There is Mr. Sidler. Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good. Can you turn up your mic a little bit?
I'm sorry, do we need to swear him in also?
Yes, thank you. Yes. Please.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
For the record, would you please state your name and position with the Public Regulation Commission?
Jack D. Sidler, Acting Engineering Bureau Chief.
Have you filed testimony in this case as shown as a hearing examiner? I'm just going to combine them for efficiency. Staff Exhibits 1 and 2.
Yes, I have.
Were those testimonies drafted by you?
Yes.
Thanks. Thank you. Are your testimonies true and correct to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes, they are.
Do you have any corrections to your testimonies?
No, I do not.
If I were to ask you the same questions today that are posed in those testimonies, would you give the same answers today under oath?
Yes, I would.
Mr. Hearing Examiner, I move what has been marked as Staff Exhibits 1 and 2 into the record.
Any objections? Staff 1 and 2 is admitted.
Thank you, Mr. Hearing Examiner. Hearing Examiner Ryan, I present Acting Engineering Bureau Chief Jack Sidler for cross-examination.
Thank you. And I have no questions for you, Mr. Sidler. I appreciate your testimony. Thank you for sitting with us today, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay. That's all of our evidence. Anything as an evidentiary matter to discuss at this point? Okay. As far as a briefing, how will you all proceed? Do you submit a joint brief?
That's My understanding, Your Honor, is that we would anticipate submitting a joint submittal after the hearing transcript comes out, but I don't imagine we need a lot of time for that, although we will need some time to coordinate.
Of course, and just FYI, I mean, there's a lot of cases going on, and I myself am sort of, as you're all familiar, the SBS TEP case came out. The commissioners are all very eager to have all of those cases resolved. So my focus will be other stuff, and I have a P&M matter that's going to require some attention. So there's no real time demand on us in this matter, I assume. Correct, Mr. Wexler?
That's correct. There's no statutory time requirement.
So, I mean, I think obviously my recommended decision is going to be consistent with all the evidence I've heard and what the stipulating parties are asking for. I'm just saying that it may be some time before that RD gets issued, and I don't assume that's a problem for the parties. Mr. Wexler?
Mr. Hearing Examiner?
Yes.
Would it be helpful to do this in the form of a proposed certification of stipulation or recommended decision?
No,
I mean, that's your preference, but
yeah, no, I don't want to do that. I just want to make sure that it's, if I have to kind of do a bunch of things first, that I'll get to this eventually, that's going to be acceptable to the parties, because there's no time constraint, and the plan is to move forward as people have already arranged. So there's no changing that's going to happen. So as far as EPE is concerned, sorry, go Mr. Herman.
Yes, Keith Herman, Doñana County. Just wondering if you consider briefing necessary in this case, and if you didn't, Doñana County would definitely be willing to waive its post-hearing brief.
I mean, I think I suppose I would like some basic statement of what the parties collectively believe the evidence shows. I don't need extensive briefing, that's for sure. I appreciate that, Mr. Herman, though. Unless there's strong feeling that there not be briefing.
Whatever will help you get your decision out sooner. We're amicable to any resolution here.
Yeah. I
well,
mean,
Mr.
I think
Hearing Examiner, maybe you'd like, I know the rule, and I'm not sure whether it applies to all cases or just rate cases, but the rule about is, you know, it's just a statement of the case so that can save you that ordeal of going thinking of that, plus a short brief, I guess, a short joint brief. Is that going to work? Would that be?
Yeah, I really don't need anything extensive. I mean, the only question I would have for the parties in terms of like just a little bit of guidance would be I mean, I kind of went there with all my questioning, which is to say, you know, you all are asking for the unit not to be on the loads and resource table moving forward. And I think there's answers as to that. That was the only thing that really wasn't addressed in the testimony, I think. And so to the extent to which you talk about anything, that's obviously a one, but I'm very clear on what the rest of the evidence says, and I don't need you all to go crazy. I think this is all fairly straightforward. So I don't know. I can just set a schedule that's very comfortable for everybody. We don't need to decide on a date right now, unless you'd prefer that to be the case.
I think we're comfortable with that approach.
I could just go look at, you know, project out how long the transcripts, and then give you all a healthy amount of time to do whatever you want to do. That'll be submitted, and then I can work this case as time allows. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
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 That's good. Thank you. Is there anything else from anyone? Any questions? Okay, so with that, we'll close the evidentiary record. We'll go off the record. And that's that. Thank you again, everybody, for appearing today.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.